So, let's start with our first speaker, Spiros Malandrakis. He is Global Insights Manager at Euromonitor International. He is key author. He writes for Drinks Business and Just Drinks inter alia. And he's also someone who speaks a lot with major news magazines such as BBC, the Financial Times, or Bloomberg. He is, what I read, a firm believer into independent analysis, and he's doing this for over 2 decades now. So, you have a real expert here, and he will do a deep dive into RTDs. What is their secret power, and in which direction are they moving? The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the great introduction. I also find it really interesting that this whole new venture here is named Agora, which is, I am Greek if my accent that doesn't give it away already, most likely. And I used to live next to the Acropolis when I was back there many, many years ago. And it's a beautiful place, and it is a place where ideas were always supposed to be exchanged, new ideas formulated, and hopefully some hope for the future comes out of it, with this kind of democratic crowdsourced ideas. Today, I'm going to talk about one of the very few stories these days that actually is very positive within alcoholic drinks. I've been covering them for the last 2 decades, as already was mentioned. Most of the time these days, I tend to speak about the bleak scenarios and the challenges and the headwinds faced by the industry. It does tend to be one of the most difficult times for alcoholic drinks since I joined, and this is not just about wine, this is about everything. But RTDs are one of these kind of unique, positive stories that hopefully will give us all something more positive to talk about. So, I describe them, the best way to describe them, and I've described it in the past, RTDs are almost like the David Bowie of alcoholic drinks. You know, they're very chameleonic in their nature. So they always change depending on every different decade. Yes? So they always represent disruption, versatility, and adaptability to different decades. It's nothing static. So when we think about RTDs, I want you to be able to think more of an idea rather than a rigidly defined category, like when we talk about whiskey, for example, or about gin. It's something that always evolves, and it's changing as the years, decades go by, and new younger generations come online. So some top-line figures. They might not look so impressive at first. So the total RTD growth for 2024 is 3%. Now, as I said, might not look like much, but when we consider what's happening in all the other categories, this is one of the very few that is actually in positive territory. And within that, we have other RTDs. For the ones that are familiar with the North American trends, these are what we used to call, and we still call them in the US, hard seltzer. Hard seltzer, you know, slimline cans, lower carbohydrate content, more millennial focused in the last 7 years. We're going to talk about them a little bit later, but they had their moment in the sun, so to speak. They grew really fast, and now they are declining very fast again. And the fastest growing, I don't know if you can see it behind the little chair there, it's 10% for the category that in Euromonitor we define as non-alcoholic RTDs. So it's a very niche new segment, but I think it has massive potential moving forward. So how I decided when I was starting to write about that to go back where the story started. And when I went back, I actually found some really interesting parallels that would be very relevant to the wine industry itself. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that, but it all started back in the late 70s, early 80s. California had an oversupply of wine and wine juice. So they didn't know what to do with it. Probably a very similar situation with today. Cheap, easy to access, and a couple of friends were sitting by the beach in California, or so the story goes, and one of them suggested that they mix this excess wine they had from the winery down the road with a couple of different juices. And that was the first moment of the birth of, they didn't know it at the time, but it was the birth of the RTD segment. So it was wine and juice in a bottle. It was cheap and cheerful, very easy to understand, very accessible, and it essentially created what came to be known as wine coolers for that era. That was the first wave of RTDs. And that is a way that I would like you to think of and understand the evolution of the segment over the decades, because wine coolers were what democratized wine for the boomer generation, 70s, 80s, in their late teenage and early adult years. Then, as that wave was coming out of fashion in the early 90s, as high-energy environments, the clubbing culture started going up, we had the rise of very fluorescently colored RTDs that became mostly known in the Anglo-Saxon world as alcopops. That also lasted for about 5 or 6 years. Then the cycle ended, and then we had, obviously, in the 2000s, the rise of hard seltzers. A common denominator when it comes to all that is exactly that pattern of very fast rise, lasting about 5 to 6 years, at some point becoming too popular for their own good, the flavor sophistication initiatives going a bit too far, the paradox of choice, the problem of people just being overwhelmed with different flavors and ideas, and then what was cool becomes decidedly uncool, and the cycle ends only to repeat again in the next decade. And then I decided to look, because I was thinking maybe if it's always cyclical, and it always is cyclical, maybe there is no actual growth pattern there. Maybe it's just a cyclical up and down that doesn't go anywhere, you know? But in reality, if you look at the volume sold all the way back when Euromonitor data started existing back in the 90s, so I wish I could have gone back, but I think it's a very clear pattern of lack of momentum at certain points, the points that describe the lower points in the cycle. But overall, this is a clear upward path and a clear positive trajectory. There's no question about the gains made over the last couple of decades. And I think that will continue moving forward. So it is RTDs, you can see them here in the US as well, even because the US was the epicenter of the hard seltzer trend. And even as the hard seltzer started going down, new sub-segments started going up. So overall, even if the hard seltzer segment was very negative, the rise of spirit-based RTDs, wine-based RTDs, malt-based RTDs actually kept overall RTDs as a category still going up. Most of the drivers right now for them are obviously flavor sophistication, that's a given, but at the same time I think we will see more formulations focusing either on higher ABV or on lower ABV, sparkling versus non-sparkling, primarily focusing on spirit-based, but we see a lot of wine as well, or at least the beginnings of the wine experimentation, some local ingredients, and finally functionality. And I think when we talk about these different characteristics of all of these categories, I just put them there for you with an example to understand what I'm talking about. So because it can get a little bit confusing and esoteric. So the first one, malt-based RTDs, I have the example of Twisted Tea. They tend to be more versatile, very affordable, so relatively cheaper than others, more tailored for high-energy occasions. Spirit-based RTDs, we have Absolute Sprite. They tend to capitalize on utilizing major brand reference points. They have this perceived authenticity. People find it much easier to understand because obviously this is a spirit and a mixer. This is how people have been drinking mixed drinks for the last hundreds of years. So it's not something new. Hard seltzer's major downfall was exactly that. It needed to explain to people what does it even mean. What does hard or seltzer mean in a European or Latin American or Asian context? No one really needs to have a clear explanation of what a Jack and Coke means because it exists. No one needs an old fashioned in a can to be explained to them because it has been around for a century. So spirit-based RTDs, I think we will see much more moving forward. Other RTDs, we talked about hard seltzers, their rise and downfall. Wine-based RTDs tend to be the spritz and aperitivo occasions and positioning, very relevant to this particular conference as well. And I think wine needs to open its eyes and just be a bit more open to experimenting with that. I know that has been quite hesitant historically, but I think the time is now. And obviously, last but not least, non-alcoholic RTDs. I heard earlier that there are going to be discussions about the adult non-alcoholic wines, non-alcoholic spirits in this particular part of the conference as well. I think it's an extremely interesting category, extremely dynamic, and the RTD segment also can and should have a piece of that pie as well. So some top line figures as well. It is off-trade versus on-trade. You can see that for the ones that are not familiar, off-trade is retail, on-trade is bars, clubs, and restaurants. So it is still massively focused on the off-trade. For me, though, because I'm always a contrarian, I see that as an opportunity, not as something to take home and just consider it a religious doctrine. That does not mean that RTDs should not be focusing on the on-trade. It means that it's a category that it still has a massive opportunity for the on-trade because it can immediately lower costs of production of cocktails or mixes, because instead of creating something with a bartender that is very busy, especially in massive events, something like that, or in a stadium or in a massive concert, you can actually have that on a tap, straight out on the line from a keg or inside a bottle or a can. And I think I would like you to see that as an opportunity rather than the way that it has historically been. So much more in the on-trade focus moving forward. And then just a breakdown on how much each of those represent. Spirits-based tend to be the biggest ones, but I think there is space for all of them. And I think wine is massively underutilized and needs to start getting up with that as well. When it comes to different types of packaging, and again, I know that wine sometimes think that the most important side of this conversation is what's in the bottle. I always remind people that most people actually drink based on what's outside the bottle, for better or worse. The alcohol industry is an extension of our personal brand. It's more akin to fashion than it is to eating food. It's not something we need. It's a status symbol, and it is very related to symbolism. So in that sense, the cans are representative of this new generation of hard seltzer that came out of the US. It's all about this convenience. In many cases, they are a bit more environmentally friendly. But I think the success of these two brands that I include here, massive runway success in the US at the moment. The first one coming in plastic PET balls, and the other one is coming in a Tetra Pak, and wine-based. Both of them completely runway success right now in the US, exactly because they do not follow this chart. Sometimes I like to show people charts just to tell them not to follow them. And in this case, there is no PET or Tetra Pak packaging really included here, but that is exactly the white space that was taken advantage of. And that is the massive opportunity for you to think outside the box, so to speak. So yes, RTDs are dead. Long live RTDs is exactly what I said earlier, that they always go up, fly too close to the sun, and then they collapse within a period of 4 to 6 years. And then that process and narrative repeats in the next decade. That there are always this kind of blurring of category lines. That's why I call it also the great drinks convergence. It's because we have soft drinks companies entering the alcohol side, alcohol companies creating non-alcoholic RTDs. It's the convergence of everything because there are no strict and rigid rules. And non-alcoholic, spirit-based, and wine-based RTDs will be leading the race in the next couple of years. We talked about the hard seltzer demise and the rise of spirit-based RTDs. We talked about non-alc, and again, a final reminder that change is the only constant we have to be familiar with. A couple of questions for you to think as I'm leaving you. Is it a trend or a fad? And I've been asked about that before. Trends tend to be much longer lasting. Fads tend to be about 6 months to 3 years lasting. This is somewhere in between. It is always lasting long enough, as we saw in the chart, in the decades, but the particular iterations by decade last 3 to 6 years. So it is both in some ways. It does start cannibalizing penetration rates for adjacent categories. So we started seeing, for example, tequila-based RTDs taking a bit of a share from tequila-based, actual tequilas or premium tequilas for that matter. So it's something to keep in mind that it does happen, but it's an opportunity as well as a downside risk. And be careful of giving consumers and drinkers too many choices. Sometimes it can become a bit overwhelming and end up detrimental instead of pushing for more growth. And with that, I hope you found it interesting and entertaining. And yeah, it was a pleasure.
Thank you very much. It was really interesting. So, Are there any questions? Please don't be shy. We are here to answer every question you have. There's someone with a microphone going around. Yes, there, the last row.
Hello, Spiros. Ollie from Global Drinks Intel in London. Good to see you again.
Haven't seen you in ages.
Very interesting to see you talk about the co-branded RTDs, like the Jack and Coke, the Absolute and Sprite. But they're sort of notable by their rarity. Why do you feel the brand owners aren't getting as involved in the co-branded opportunity than they really ought to be, given how the consumer's relationship with those brands is so established?
I would. It's a great question, and I have to be careful of how I answer it. I think, to a degree, when it comes to big major manufacturers like soft drinks companies like Coke, for example, I know that there was an inherent institutional hesitance to enter the alcohol space. I remember a few years ago they were actually asking me, Spiros, do you think we're going to have a reputational damage for even entering with one toe inside the alcohol arena? Which obviously is not the case. I mean, no one really cares if Coke creates a co-branded, cocktail with that. I think historically that used to be that, and these companies tended to focus on their lanes. So there is this kind of complacency, institutional hesitance. But I think that is actually changing now. And I think what they're doing right now is testing the ground to see how successful these brands can be. And once that is achieved, and I think many of them are not, runway successes, but they're doing pretty well, all things considered. I would expect to see many more of this in the next couple of years compared to where we were a couple of years ago. Yeah, so I expect that to gain momentum forward.
Are there any other questions? I give you a few seconds to think about. So, thank you very much for this great keynote and to be the first to open Agora with me. I now come to my second speaker. So, when spritz turned Prosecco into a lifestyle ritual, it rebooted the whole category. It was more than marketing. It was social meaning, new social meaning and experiences. My second speaker, Martina Obregón, is the person who can talk to you about that. She is Chief Marketing Officer and Executive Committee member of Henkell Freixenet, the world's leading sparkling wine company, you all know obviously, with over 30 years of experiences with consumer goods, most of them in the wine industry, but she worked for the beauty industry before and for Procter & Gamble, so she knows a lot of different industries as well. She will speak about Prosecco, about Cava, and about alcohol-free sparkling, about changing consumer habits. And my favorite, she brings some data that shows which categories are growing and why. So the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you very much. I hope my microphone works. If not, I can speak up a bit. First of all, I want to thank Spiros for the presentation. I think it was good to have him first because it shows how important it is to understand where consumers are going, understanding their preferences and how preferences change over time. And in the end, it's always the call to the producers, or call it for the brand owners, to adapt and embrace these changes. So today I would like to talk about sparkling wine. So I think that's what I know how to do best. So I have some very nice partners here actually sitting in the row that have known me for many years. So I've been working in the sparkling wine industry now for many, many years and have seen how sparkling wine, or I call it better, celebration, has changed over time. So when you think about celebration, for centuries it's been the synonymous for celebration. The drink that marked important events like victory, the countdown for New Year's Eve, the birthdays, or the birth of a child. And when we look at it, of how this has changed over the past decade or so, maybe even a little longer, but over the past decade, the meaning of celebration has really changed. And with that, the role of sparkling wine has changed and must change. So what I would like to do today is explore a little bit with you how the past decade has really reshaped the sparkling wine landscape, changes that we see in occasions, changes or shifts in expectations from consumers. And in the end, that's the important part. It marks an opportunity for all producers and brand owners to take on and leverage these new opportunities that consumers offer. Because ultimately, really understanding the future of sparkling wine begins with understanding how people celebrate today and tomorrow. So, talking about consumers. Oh, sorry. When we talk about, I mentioned it before, you know, the embracing the big moments, and this is what for the many, many years we have been working extensively, what I called, you know, the moments, the little luxury moments. However, this has changed over time a lot, you know. We go beyond the celebrations of the birthdays, etc. And a little bit contrasting here, what you see is the numbers alone show a little bit. We could go back further and you would see that sparkling wine within the wine industry, luckily, has been a category that has been in growth. It's been in growth, roughly speaking, until 2021. So a good category to be in, exploring and leveraging opportunities. However, what has happened over the past years, namely since 21, starting with the pandemic, we've seen there is a stagnation in sparkling wine. We want to understand the whys and what opportunities this offers. And as I've mentioned before, consumers and occasions, and therefore celebration, the meaning of celebration has changed. From sparkling wine back then, and here we go back very much, but it's just symbolic to say, you know, the little luxury moment has evolved to different times of the day, to different drinks, to different ways of, you know, spending time together. So the everyday moment of enjoyment has replaced what I would say the special occasions of luxury. What has helped here are big, big shifts in consumer behaviors, in consumption habits. You see here Prosecco. We will go into more depth when you see Prosecco has really, really helped to push the overall category, but it also turned the category much more casual and everyday. Mixology, obviously everybody knows it. Aperol, the one that has opened that occasion, added new consumption moments to consumers that otherwise probably would have not come into this occasion of celebrating. So for us, mixology and aperitivo certainly a huge opportunity. And then obviously moderation, we will look a little bit, some numbers as well. Moderation, definitely the key trend, and I would say reality that is now reshaping our industry and the way we work at Henkell Freixenet. Some numbers, as I was asked to. So you see here a little bit over the past, roughly speaking, 10 years. We can call it, and you all know it, the Prosecco has been, you know, the one that drove the overall category growth. Outstanding double-digit growth, starting even, you know, before 2015, but with a clear peak, only accompanied, I would say, or, you know, not even matched by far, but Crémant and non-alc are the only other two still niche segments that show noticeable growth. On the other side, we see that the champagne, and namely cava, has been rather on a stagnating or declining trend over the past 10 years. So let's have a bit of a zoom into the Prosecco momentum, which by now has become a Prosecco reality. It has become the market largely. And here you see in a more depth number how it hasn't doubled yet, but we are talking about more than 700 million bottles sold in 2024 or forecast 2025. We don't have the final figures yet, but certainly by far the biggest and most important category, and it has become to a large extent even synonymous with sparkling wine for many consumers nowadays. When we look at the markets that are driving that growth, although we can definitely say we have the numbers, it's a global trend. No country which we may or could have said some years ago, you know, Eastern Europe, Japan, you name it, South America, maybe it will not hit, maybe it will not evolve. it's not true. We see the growth and the reality that all countries have or will and have embraced sparkling Prosecco's growth via Prosecco. So top markets obviously still Italy, soon to be maybe overtaken by US, followed by UK, France, Germany, but many, many other markets, double-digit growth following this trend. So this is certainly one of the important trends that has shaped the industry, and more importantly, I would say, how consumers celebrate, because it shifted from the more special, special occasions to the more everyday occasion. Then I mentioned it before. I don't know about you, which industry you work in. We have been observing very, very closely the aperitivo trend, the reality, the success of Aperol. And when you look at it, it's just another way of how young people especially, but also, again, all age groups find new moments, new occasions to celebrate. Smaller moments, getting together, just being with friends. It's the moment, it's more daytime, so it's a new occasion, a new moment. It's a new drink to celebrate, therefore, what I would have called back then our territory, being a sparkling wine company that or sparkling wine brand standing for celebration. So, new occasion, new consumers coming in via aperitivo. Obviously, it's a big, big thing that shaped the landscape of sparkling wine. So, as I mentioned, daytime, it's a bonding occasion, transitional moment towards the evening. This is when this is consumed. It's incremental. That's why I mean it's so important to understand how this is not necessarily cannibalization, but extension and more frequency when it comes to consumers. It's opening up the appetite, so often pairing is another important thing. And in the end, it's the embracing a lifestyle that is relevant for today's consumer. We are not blind to those trends, so when you pass by our stand here close by, you will see that we have been very carefully listening to consumers, trying to understand at its best how we can embrace and attract consumers to our brand franchise, both on Mio Netto, you have seen before, we launched it already 2 years ago, a Mio Netto Aperitivo, and the new one now launching as we speak here at ProWein. We are launching a Freixenet Aperitivo called Solare to also be part of those moments of celebrations that otherwise we wouldn't be part of. Moving on to another big shift in consumer behavior, I would say, or in consumer preferences. We very often say it's Gen Z driven, and it's true. They are much more conscious, sober conscious, they are more aware, but it doesn't stop with the young consumers. We see this again, it's a reality that crosses all age group. It's what we call moderation. Moderation is on everybody's lip, and it's on everybody's eyes, because nowadays when you look into the press, social media, you name it, basically, alcohol seems, or they want to make it sound as if it was dangerous or not healthy. So this doesn't help. So again, you need to embrace these expectations that are new, that are coming on a category that wasn't there before, sparkling wine, even still wines, and we will hear more later on. But again, from a pure volume size, it is a niche. At this point, it's a niche. We've seen it before. It is double-digit growth all over the world, so we have no exception. We see this double-digit growth in every single country across the globe. Higher double-digit numbers. Being a niche still, you see the no alc, excluding the low alc in our sparkling wine, not reaching at 100 million, but we expect this growth to continue. And in the end, it's more than just the pure size. It's a way of positioning yourself as a brand and responding to what the consumers and what the trends of today's, purpose-driven brands need to be. So here you see, I think it's not new to you, Germany has, probably not that it will be in the future, but has been historically a big sparkling wine non-alc market. But this is changing because we see incredible growth outside of Germany, namely UK, France, US, Poland, but also all other countries. So this is for us a new reality, And today, I think I have a chart. Yeah, I was going to say it doesn't represent yet 10% of total sales, but 12% to be very, very factual here. But it is an important part of our business, and to talk to consumers and ensuring we have the coverage to cover needs and occasions which otherwise we would not cover. Again, here our answer, we go across our portfolio, ensuring we have best quality at the forefront of anything being offered these days, both in sparkling wine as well in aperitivo, and soon to be launched also the Solare I mentioned before in the non-alc version, obviously the Coro Negros, the Mio Netto, so we have alcohol-free versions across our portfolio. So when I sum everything up, we can say, yes, the world is changing. Consumers' expectations, consumers' needs, even occasions, as we see, are changing. And consumption, therefore, is changing. However, the most important thing is consumers will always celebrate. They will celebrate differently. The question is when they celebrate, how they celebrate, and with what they celebrate. And the job to be done to any producer, or I would call it, to any marketeer, is make sure you are there and you offer the best possible solution to the consumers. So with that, I end and invite you for cheers to life.
Thank you very much. This was very inspiring. One question for me before I go to the audience. How does Gen Z consume compared to the rest of the crowd?
As I said, first of all, we see that the Gen Z is a much more sober conscious, as we call them, sober conscious cohort. So they are much more conscious of what they consume, so it's rather less but better quality. Then they tend to have, some of them opt out altogether. So this is another thing, how to capture consumers that opt out of alcohol altogether. So it could be moderation, less but better. There is a smaller group, they opt out altogether, so still they celebrate. And we as a celebration company need to understand and offer something for them as well. But generally speaking, yeah, they drink less but better, and moderation is one choice out of many they may choose.
Are there any questions from the audience? Let me see. I give you a few seconds to think about. Come on, you have the expert on sparkling wine here. Yes, there's a question. There, row 2.
Hello. Yes, I have one question, because the younger generation, they are also getting more individual. They are not loyal to brands anymore. They are picking what they want in the moment. How do you respond to it? Do you need more products to offer to them?
Very good point. I think we are also faced with that. Those are these are facts number based. So we definitely see how the younger consumers want individualism or their own preference. So this could be a taste, and maybe we see more now in the next presentation. But the format itself, the 750 ml for everybody the same might not be the answer. So without spoiling here, we are working actively also on our brand proposition, on offering, across our portfolio, what I would call the right format and pack to those consumers who want their preferred way off. But I do believe a brand provides, first of all, security and the guarantee that these consumers look in the myth of the choices that are out there. So we give guidance, we help, to help guide the choice by brand endorsement, but definitely the way we need to deliver the product to the younger consumers will change.
Any more questions? So, I say thank you very much.
Thank you.
If you want to taste the wines,
yes,
there
right
is a
over
tasting. There's a tasting tomorrow at the Sparkling Bar at 4, where you can taste Henkell Freixenet, and it's directly opposite to the booth of Henkell Freixenet in Hall 4. So just come by and taste what you have seen here. With that, I come to our next speaker. So, now we talk no low. And if we talk no low, we have the international expert in this field. It's Irem Eren. She is a consultant, a wine judge, an educator and a Master of Wine candidate. She is the Solus Technology Brand Ambassador and has a background in production, technology, and global trade. Before she started her consultancy, which is not a long time ago, she worked for BevZero and for Familia Torres. So you have a real expert from different parts of the business. So in her keynote, she will show how no-low alcohol wine has moved from a trend status to a category in transformation. So, where's the category heading, and how could a producer treat moderation without losing credibility?
Oh, that's a tough question. Should we start with the tough question, or should we come to that after? I think I'll come to that after. Thank you so much, Anya, and thank you so much to Spiros and to Martina for the amazing presentation. And my presentation is called From Trends to Transformation, because I want to show you how no and low alcohol wine changes or has changed across last 2 decades. And actually, what happened today in this opening session of Agora already kind of proves that the from trends to transformation theory, because I've been doing talks about no and low alcohol wines since I think 2019. And then when I started to do these talks, I was the only one who was talking about no and low. And I was seen as a trader in the wine industry, and now today I'm the third speaker focusing on this, but already the first and the second speaker talk about no and low alcohol wine, and I think I'm not considered anymore the trader in the wine industry. So let's see what's happening. So wine is changing. Wine industry is going through difficult times, and as we know, the consumption is decreasing, and there are several reasons behind that. But let's see what's happening. So there are structural pressures on wine for several different reasons, and I will come to each of them in a bit, because what we want to see here is what is happening in the wine industry and why we are talking about no and low alcohol, and which is not a trend anymore, it's a category. So global warming is affecting us in many different ways, but as a main result within our context is the alcohol levels are rising. Since 19s, the average alcohol levels has risen 2%. And then while this is happening, the consumer habits are changing. Over almost 2 decades ago, today, the category started as a curiosity with dry January, but it's not only dry January anymore. We had dry July, and then we had sober October, stop October, and then we have damp January, which is not about abstaining anymore, it's about moderation, and now we have zebra striping, meaning in the same occasion, consumers switch between normal full strength alcohol and no and low alcohol strength. So with all these happening, wine consumption has been decreasing. Wine production has been always more than wine consumption, especially in Europe, but lately this gap is getting bigger and bigger. The consumers are still drinking, but they are drinking less and they are drinking better. So there is a trend in the premiumization, and innovation is in the taste and the function. We have functional drinks, which is a subcategory in this category. And last but not least, alcohol duty. Same alcohol, same unit, same drink is priced different in each country for different reasons, but also one of the reasons is the alcohol taxes. And then World Trade Organization is saying that there is no healthy amount of alcohol. Before, they were saying that wine is healthy for you, 1 or 2 glasses per day is good, but now they say that not anymore. So that's why, as of 25, European Union Commission declared that wine consumption per capita has decreased 10%. And now we are not talking about a trend anymore, we are talking about a category. No and low alcohol generally altogether is $24 billion, and it's going to increase 9% in car in no and low alcohol wine segment. And it's not only about abstaining anymore, the abstainers are only 17% of the category. We have 17% blenders, 21% trialers, and 43% substituters, meaning drinking on depending on the occasions. So we know where we are standing today now in the wine industry and what happened in the structural transformation. Obviously, this category was led by beer, and then spirits and the mixers joined the trend, and then last but not least wine, and lots of celebrities are in this field now. So I think a few decades ago all the celebrities had beer brands. I mean, not all, but many of the celebrities were involved in the beer brands, and now many celebrities are involved in the drinks and no and low alcohol. If we do a quick comparison, beer and the spirits have bigger budgets, so they have invested a lot in the R&D, but wine has been obviously more traditional and coming to the game a little bit slower, as Spiros was saying this morning. So there's still way to go. But what is happening is in early 20s, this was still experimentation because there were curious consumers, but inconsistent quality and experimentation with the technology. The alcoholization started with reverse osmosis. Today, still many chateaus in Bordeaux, many estates in Napa, Sonoma is using reverse osmosis for alcohol adjustment. But then we moved to spinning cone column, then vacuum distillation, Carl Jung obviously, and in 2010-20, that area, the quality started to improve. Sugar levels started to decrease in the non-alcoholic drinks, and thanks to the technology obviously, and now today we are having a really focus in the technology to make better and better products. So in Solos, what we also do is not only about de-alcoholization anymore, it is also about aroma recovery, recovering the essence of the product. So this is a quick scheme of the de-alcoholization, but then what we are able to do is capturing the aromas, the essence of the wine, and trying to make a no alcohol, low alcohol wine, reflecting the terroir and winemakers' work. And now, also again, in the industry, we are not afraid of showing how we de-alcoholize. So this is from Valencia Solos facility. I mean, this looks like a club, right? Or it could be a contemporary art gallery. And even in Torres, now they include part of the wine tourism, they include the visit in their de-alcoholization room as well. So 5 years ago, maybe it wouldn't be, even not 5, 3 years ago, it was impossible, but today things are changing. Last but not least, the expansion in the global footprint is expanding, and there are many service centers across the world. Only Solos has 2 locations in Germany, 1 in Spain, 1 in Switzerland, 1 in US, and France and Chile is on the way. So while this is happening in terms of the technology and the producers are changing, so this is a brand-driven category, but also brands are doing extension in their category. Rosé, no alcohol, and low alcohol, RTD. This is RTD with wine. And then Christian Net. It's a family winery, 5th generation. The 5th generation started the whole range of non-alcoholic products. Actually, half an hour ago, Christian Net got a Grand Gold from Mundus Vini with his Pinot Blanco, Weissburgunder. So he's in hall 5. If you want to go and taste, feel free. And then I think Colonul is also in hall 5. What they did, they did a collaboration with Schloss Johannesburg, de-alcoholizing their Rieslings from special cuvées from 60s, 70s, 80s. And then this got 93 points from James Suckling. It's 100 euros per bottle. So as we are here now, if you have chance, go and taste it in hall 5, because otherwise you will have to pay 100 euros for the bottle. Last section is here how this has changed in the market, route to market. Obviously, this category started in the online, and then brick and mortars, small shops. Then it expanded to retail. Then it expanded to on-trade, specific locations for non-alcohol drinks. This is Dublin, Virgin Mary. And then importers and distributors started to give focus on that. So this is Terra Vigna, Switzerland. They did an only non-alcoholic branch, and they organized tastings with that. And last but not least, we are seeing it in fine dining. 3-star restaurant, Michelin, Wassner Family Group, Sven Wassner Memories. They don't only do wine pairings anymore, and they don't call it wine pairings. They call it beverage pairings. And 30% of that beverage pairing is non-alcoholic wines and non-alcoholic beverages. And Zeronimo's founder, Katja Berninger, sorry for my pronunciation, did a collaboration with a Michelin star chef, David Geiser to work on how non-alcoholic wines is pairing with the food. What is the structural elements? So normally we would have considered with Asian food, with spicy food, Riesling, off-dry Rieslings are better, or Gewürztraminer is better. We wouldn't normally consider red wine, but they say that red wine, the alcoholized non-alcoholic red wine, goes really well with spicy Asian food. So last but not least, European Union regulations. What is all these things happening? While all these things happening, European Union regulations are adapting. Today is March 15th, and March 18th, in 3 days, the new regulations will be effective. So European Union regulation proposed in March 28th, including no and low alcohol into the wine category. And then discussions, June, November, and finally it was approved in February. And if we consider actually European Union, how bureaucratic they are, starting from March 25 and having it approved and effective March 18, it's very fast. Believe me, it's very fast. So now they're including no and low alcohol in the wine category, meaning we don't have to call them anymore dealcoholized wines. We can call them no alcohol wine, but it's not going to be called low alcohol anymore. It's going to be called reduced alcohol. And then there's going to be implications, obviously, in the technology used or the labels, the ingredients, and also European Union Commission is offering subsidies to the wineries in European Union who are expanding to these products and different formats as well. And this is showing us a real transformation within the category. So no and low alcohol wine is not a trend anymore. It's a category and it's going to stay here. And the growth is global, and even regulations are adapting to this change. And wine is not losing its relevance. It is expanding the possibilities and giving the consumers new opportunities and expanding the opportunities with new markets as well. So thank you so much for your attention. I tried to make it like in 15 minutes, the whole world of no and low wine and how it changed. So I hope it was good.
Yes, thank you very much. You got me with the fine dining thing. So can I come back to my question? How do producers do that without doing damage to the alcoholic category?
This is, I think it's a very good question. I didn't want to start with this because I didn't want to start with a controversial opening. I don't think that we should even frame it like this, doing a damage to the category, because it is not a damage. It is actually other way around. It is opportunity, giving opportunity to the alcoholic category, because this category is not anti-alcohol. It is pro-choice. So we are giving choice to the consumers who are not necessarily drinking alcohol, or they don't like the taste of it. And also, it's not, again, what we saw, it's not about abstaining, it's about moderation. So, for example, Torres with Natureo is making the opening new markets, new consumers, and then they know the brand and they can also move to their other wines with alcohol. So I think we should see that as two different lines of business coexisting together, not a substitution.
Okay, are there any questions from the audience? So this audience is not so much into questioning. There's one.
Realistically, how large do you think this market can grow? Will we see one or two producers come out with a really fantastic non-alc brand and everybody's sort of struggling? How far can we go with non-alc?
So also Martina was mentioning that it's almost, we're talking about double-digit growth. So it's still niche, it's still small. We are still talking about $25 billion US dollar category. It's still small if you consider it in the entire alcohol world category. But the growth, annual compound of growth rate is very fast, it's very high. So what has happened is still this category is brand driven. Small brands, brand owners, not necessarily people coming from wine backgrounds, launched products. And then actually wineries started to expand their portfolio, and now big players are getting into the game. And I'm just gonna say one thing to show how big it's gonna be. Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy 2 years ago invested in French Bloom. and now has it in part of the most important top portfolio. So if Monsieur Arnaud doesn't believe in something, he wouldn't do it. So I think it's one of the best signs of that how this category will grow.
Any more questions? Yes, there.
Thanks for the talk. On the branding side, where do you see more opportunity in terms of using already alcoholic brands and expanding into non-alcoholic, or do you see it as a separate category where it's more opportunity, you think?
So actually there are different types of consumers and there are different types of opportunities. So normally how it started as like the second, the letter, like what you suggested. So non-alcoholic brands or not related to brands, they started their products. For example, Michaela is from Oddbird, and Oddbird started with a pure non-alcoholic category without having alcohol. So there's a drive in there because I think what happened is the alcohol brands, and especially wine brands, they don't want to take the risk, and nobody wants to be the first. Everyone wants to be the second because they want the first person do it and they want to see it works. So depending on your opportunity, depending on different market, I think it can work both well. But for example, for a brand like Freixenet, they have already a brand identity and brand strength. So obviously for them, it is very smart to launch with a zero Freixenet. But then if you are a newcomer, is a startup, I think there's nothing wrong with starting with your own non-alcoholic brand. I think, again, depending on the country, depending on the consumer, if you are aiming to wine consumers or if you're aiming for consumer who is looking for a tasty and good quality beverage. So it can, again, both would work in the same context.
Anything else? We still have a few minutes left. So I have one. You sometimes read that consumers are put off because it's highly processed. Is this a problem for non-alcoholic wines?
So again, you're asking very controversial questions and I like it. So again, from the consumer side, there are two different aspects. So there are different consumers. There are consumers who are wine drinkers, but they are looking for moderation of alcohol. And those consumers are the most difficult ones because they would be the main barrier to this category and they would non-stop compare non-alcoholic wine with wine. So those consumers, they consider that it is highly processed. And other consumers who are looking for alcohol-free or low-alcohol product and looking for something different and tasty, they don't really think about how it is made and what are the ingredients. Yes, there is a consumer of like who is following the wellness narrative. There are, yes, but generally they don't really think that it's processed, and actually they think that it is quite healthy because there's no alcohol. But if you go back to the processing, again, yes, it's processed because we are dealcoholizing, we are removing the alcohol, and we are changing the structure. But it's not a chemical process, it's total physical separation. So if we have a really high quality wine as a base wine, or good quality base wine, and if you use a gentle technology, then we can dealcoholize and we can use quite clean dealcoholized wine without adding extra ingredients or artificial aromas. And then we can do it as low intervention as possible. But on the other hand, again, it is not magic. There's know-how, winemakers' expertise involved as well. So again, I will say yes and no.
Oh, okay. Oh, two more questions.
Hi, thank you very much for the talk. Mihaela Mihina from Oddbird. So we've been on the market now for 16 years doing non-alcoholic premium. And we don't see the problem being the barrier with the consumers, but rather with the sommeliers and the restaurants.
Yeah.
And what we see as a company, and we work very hard on building research consortiums and educations on that, is the lack of education in schools, in like restaurants. They don't, like, people are afraid to talk about it and they don't know how to offer it. Like yesterday I was in a restaurant, they offered me non-alcoholic wines that was open for like a week and they had no bubble. So how do you overcome these barriers as in the category? What do you think is the solution?
Yeah, that is also a very important point, and thank you for bringing that. Yes, we need education and education of the trade, because what you're saying, Michaela, is very true, because the consumers is already asking for these products. They accept it, except really like the snobby wine consumers. That is a different part, but generally consumers accept it, but the trade doesn't know how to get there. But 5-6 years ago, wineries, producers were also a barrier, and they didn't want to produce, but now they understand that they have to produce because they need to meet the consumers' demand. But there's a gap, and generally this is the problem of the wine industry, because the supply chain is very long, and the producer and the consumer, most of the time, they don't have any contact. There are so many different middlemen in the supply chain. So if we consider that wine industry, wine sales is quite traditional, and now think about how to sell a position low and low alcohol wine. So that's why the route to markets is very important. There are importers and distributors who are only focusing that, but there are traditional importers and distributors who are selling. So we need to include education in that. That's actually something that I'm working on, educating distributors and importers. And also 2 years ago in WSET Diploma, we included the no and low alcohol wine in terms of making and market, but still diploma. How many people has diploma? So we need to start considering to include it in level 1, level 2, level 3, so that we can have better care for these products, as you say, to meet the consumer.
There was another question.
Congratulations for the presentation.
Thank you.
I'm educator for WSET and sommeliers. And one thing that we reinforce a lot is the balance of the wine. And alcohol is very good to soft the harshness of tannins and acidity. So I'm wondering how no alcohol wine can be balanced if they always have to have very low acidity and tannins, or what's your perspective on that?
Thank you so much again for this. This is a very great question. I didn't want to include this aspect in the presentation because I didn't want to go into technical, but I'm very happy that you brought this up. What happens with the dealcoholization is we are changing completely the structure. And depending on the technology we use, there are different levels of yield loss. We are losing a percentage of the wine. It can be from 15 and up to 30%. So meaning, if let's say even if it is 15, which is quite low, then the total acidity increases 15%, the pH decreases 15%, so we have a quite gap. So that's why we see lots of products in the market with awful levels of residual sugars to be able to kind of balance the gap. But now the winemakers are more and more experienced, so there are several winemakers that who are vinifying accordingly for dealcoholization. So then they choose the varieties accordingly, looking at the total acidity and pH levels, and also with the technology is very important. But for example, because you were mentioning about the tannins, I will again refer to Weingut.net, Christian Net. I think for me, his reds are the best reds I ever tasted, Merlot, Pinot Noir. What he does, he's vinifying accordingly, and then he never picks early to be able to have lower alcohol, but he lets the grapes to ripen optimally so that the tannins can ripen. And then after the alcoholization, what we can do is to adjust it, or before the alcoholization, monoproteins are very good to kind of round in the tannins. Soften the tannins, or gamma arabic, and these products are allowed in the winemaking as well. And then obviously we still need to adjust it, and there are some producers using sugar, glycerol, but normally if you want to stay in the clean label category, the recommendation is using grape must. But again, if you choose the wine with not super high levels of total acidity and less malic and more tartaric, then and not very low pH, then it is easier to adjust it without relying on sugar and grape must.
So, thank you very much. We are running out of time. So, no more questions now. Thank you to
Thank you so
the
much.
3 speakers of this morning. You did a great job. Thank you for all the information.